Hello everyone and welcome back to another video where today I wanted to do something a little bit different, something I haven't done in a while. I want to talk about a rumour, and less so even the rumour itself and what the rumour would suggest for the future of Doctor Who. So yeah, strap in, this is going to be a little bit speculative, but I hope you enjoy it. Feel free to like the video if you do, subscribe if you're new as well, that would be greatly appreciated. We're trying to get to 30,000, and I'd love to get there by the end of the year. We're about 29,400, so we're getting close. Can we hit it by Christmas? Who knows at this point, but yeah, let's just dive right in. So I want to give credit to Doctor Who Production News for tweeting this at first, and it says, according to Radio Free Skaro, well-placed industry sources say the War Between the Land and the Sea will transmit on BBC in December 2025, and then on Disney Plus in February 2026. They are aware of what Kate Phillips said in Edinburgh, yet trust their sources. And so yeah, this comes from a podcast by the name of Radio Free Skaro, and I will be playing the clip where they discuss this in full here. And I'll also be linking the full podcast in the description below.
The War Between the Land and the Sea, it looks very much, according to a couple sources, very well-placed sources here at Radio Free Skaro, say that the War Between the Land and the Sea will air in December on the BBC, February on Disney Plus. Disney Plus will stay with the February launch date for that, and it will be on the BBC.
Now, I want to make clear, because some people might be saying, well, it's just a podcast saying this, you know, does this necessarily have any more backing than anyone else saying it? And I want to say that I trust Radio Free Skaro, because they have been in the game for a very long time, and they have a very good reputation. They've interviewed several people who have been closely involved with the show. You know, they did a fascinating interview with Chris Chibnall around 2023, talking about a lot of the behind-the-scenes stuff of his era that was very interesting. So I have reason to trust Radio Free Skaro and their sources here. And they are saying that, yes, as they say there, that there are essentially going to be two different release dates for The War Between Land and the Sea. December here in the UK and February Disney Plus, rest of the world. This is interesting for a few reasons. First of all, and I think most immediately, this would kind of explain the weird discrepancies surrounding people's kind of discussions about when this show is actually going to come out. Obviously, Doctor Who magazine said some months ago that it would come out this year, only for Kate Phillips at the BBC, who Doctor Who Production News mentioned, saying it would be a 2026 thing. So maybe that inconsistency is the result of the fact that there's actually been a bit of conflict as to when this is going to come out, and it's actually going to be coming out at different times across the two different regions, which is not unheard of for shows, by the way. There are many shows that don't come out in one territory, but do come out in another one. The interesting thing about this, though, is that this would be the first time that the Doctor Who deal has worked like this. Ever since Disney has gotten Doctor Who internationally, it's always been simulcast. It's always been, as soon as it's on BBC, it's also on Disney Plus. That's how it's been. This would be the first deviation from that. And I think that's interesting for a few reasons. The first one being, I think that it's kind of proof that Disney are probably done with Doctor Who. Now, I tweeted this earlier, and a lot of people said, well, you know, what's the evidence for that? Why would that necessarily mean that? If Disney really cared about Doctor Who, do you really think they'd want the BBC to have it 2-3 months ahead of time, you know, this spin-off? If they really thought that, you know, the Doctor Who spin-off was going to push the needle for them in any significant way? No, they'd be wanting it to come out exactly the same time to get the maximum amount of viewership. Because the reality of it is, if you leave things 3 months and you have it released in another territory, guess what most people are going to do? They're probably just going to go and pirate it, right? They're going to go pirate it, or they're going to use a VPN or something. That's just what they're going to do. So the fact that Disney, if this is to be believed, are letting the BBC air this, you know, 2 months ahead of them, is kind of evidence to me that they don't really care. On the BBC's end, though, this also raises an interesting thing, because as we've been hearing for the longest time, we weren't going to hear anything about Doctor Who until after season 2, and then obviously people have been saying, oh, well, we've still got The War Between left. However, if The War Between comes out in December for the UK audience, is that the BBC's way of basically allowing themselves to talk about Doctor Who and the future of it, you know, once that's out quicker than, obviously, next year? Potentially. That's something I'm thinking that maybe might be in play here. Another thing as well, of course, is the BBC Christmas schedule. It's no secret that so far this year, we haven't really heard a lot about the Christmas schedule. In contrast to last year, which was just jam-packed full of stuff, You know, the BBC lineup in particular, obviously it had Doctor Who, but it also had Wallace and Gromit, and it had Gavin and Stacey, and they were both ginormous. By contrast, this year it's seeming pretty quiet. So maybe they want to basically use War Between as kind of a new thing to actually broadcast over the Christmas period. I don't know whether it seems particularly festive from what we've seen so far, but I think that could also very much be part of their thinking as well. The other interesting aspect about this, though, is that if this does come out in December in the UK, then they are cutting marketing pretty fine. I mean, we're coming towards the end of October here, you know, it's almost Halloween, and that makes me wonder, you know, when are we actually going to start hearing something about the War Between? I already kind of found it weird that we had a trailer in season 2 and then basically nothing after that since then. But especially if they are releasing it in December in the UK, they're probably going to have to make that known to the public pretty soon. However, having said that, there have also been times where we basically didn't know broadcast times until about 2 weeks prior, at least in the Chibnall era. But for the Russell era stuff, that's tended not to be the case. We've tended to know pretty far ahead when Doctor Who is coming out, and when Doctor Who related stuff such as this would be coming out. The other thing to consider about Disney wanting it in February is that February isn't exactly like a prime slot, you know what I mean? Like, December, we'll have all of their Christmas lineup, all of the Christmas movies, and maybe they've just got too much coming out in December, so they don't want the War Between there. However, if you wanted the maximum amount of eyes on it, December would be the prime slot. February is the type of month in streaming in particular when you kind of just dump everything. January, February are kind of famously known as dead months, especially in like the online streaming world, and indeed the online content creation world as well, because, you know, ad rates are lower, people are back to work, you know, so they aren't spending as much money after Christmas. So again, I think that's another piece of evidence to me that, like, I just don't think Disney are really all that bothered. Do you know what I mean? I think they just will put it out when they want to put it out, and if the BBC want to put it out earlier, so be it. This will be, if this does happen, and again, you know, I will say, it's not confirmed, this is a rumour, this will be annoying to international Doctor Who fans, for sure, but, you know, VPNs exist. I mean, I'm not going to tell you to use them, but I'm also not going to tell you not to use them at the same time if you do want to watch The War Between Land and the Sea, because I'm sure there will be ways around it. But let me know what you guys think. I think for me, if this did happen, I mean, I was already pretty sure that Disney were out, but I think this would kind of just be the final nail in that. Like, yeah, if they really wanted, you know, the most eyes on Doctor Who and Doctor Who related stuff, if they really cared about that, then they'd want it on at the same time as the BBC. The fact that they're letting the BBC potentially have it 2 months early, evidence to me that, you know, they're not all that bothered, really. And I think that while that's a shame, what it may lead to is potentially us hearing something about Doctor Who perhaps earlier, if, you know, War Between is already out in the UK. And I mean, let's be honest, I think the writing has been on the wall about Disney for quite some time. Obviously, we don't have it confirmed, things can change, but I think from reading the room, that's kind of been the vibe everyone's getting, right? The other thing is, maybe it's just the executives wanting to just, you know, get it out there as soon as possible. You know, Russell and Jane Tranter have definitely been sounding a bit like they just want this all, you know, done and finished. So maybe the reason they're pushing for an earlier release date is just so that they can move on, basically. But Disney, you know, obviously, because contractually they have it until War Between airs, maybe they're dragging it out. I don't know. But let me know what you guys think. If you did enjoy the video, be sure to give it a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you later.